Usually when you step up to a mirror, in your hallway or your bathroom, the expectation is just incredibly straightforward.
Right. You're just looking for a reflection.
Exactly. You're
Yeah.
looking for this purely physical, surface level inventory. You check if your collar is straight. You make sure there's nothing in your teeth, and you just move on with your day. It's a completely passive transaction. The glass is just, reflecting the light bouncing off your physical form.
Yeah, the reflection is entirely contained. Like what happens in the glass stays in the glass. It doesn't have any actual bearing on the physical room
Uh,
around you.
But imagine if that transaction wasn't just confined to the physical world. Imagine walking up to a mirror, and instead of showing your face, it reflected the exact frequency of your internal state.
Oh, wow.
Right. Like your quietest, most private anxieties, your hidden resentments, or even your absolute purest moments of gratitude. And then take that one step further. Imagine if that emotional reflection didn't just stay trapped behind the glass, but actively bled out into the room.
And physically shaped your reality.
Exactly. Physically shaping the events, the people that you encounter for the rest of the day.
I mean, that paradigm completely dissolves the boundary between the internal mind and the external world. You transition from being a passive observer of your day to being this active, continuous creator of your own reality, whether you want that responsibility or not, honestly.
Yeah, and that slightly terrifying level of responsibility is exactly where we're starting today. Welcome to this deep dive. We are exploring a really fascinating, newly translated philosophical and spiritual document.
It's a really unique text.
It really is. It was authored on November 7, 2020 by a writer named Shuifeng. And the English translation was provided by Kinyu and edited by Kair. It carries this incredibly striking title. It's called The Naked Will Be One With Me.
And, the title itself kind of signals a demand for absolute vulnerability, which, as we'll see, becomes the central pillar of this entire worldview.
Okay, so let's unpack this for you listening. Our mission today is to map out a document that offers a highly specific and honestly an often polarizing set of instructions for living. It blends this profound, almost ethereal concept of spiritual surrender with some surprisingly gritty, cynical survival tactics for navigating modern society.
But before we go any further, setting our analytical framework for you is crucial here. This text dives into deep theological, behavioral, and potentially very divisive territory, especially regarding societal institutions and human relationships.
Right? It pulls no punches.
It really doesn't. So our objective here is not to endorse these viewpoints or, to validate the author's theology or politics. We are just acting as impartial cartographers today. We want to map the internal logic of this specific source material, examine the mechanisms of how the author believes the universe functions, and basically just present those ideas to you objectively.
We are mapping the territory to understand the landscape, not necessarily moving in. So, let's start with that initial mirror concept. How does this text explain the mechanics of our internal state dictating external reality?
Well, the author outlines a relentless, unforgiving law of emotional reflection. The core mechanism is that your external reality is simply a mirror of your internal frequency. The text states explicitly that you must actively show your beauty to the outside world in order to remain beautiful.
Okay.
And the corollary to that is that if you display what the author defines as ugly sides, so that's troubles, pain, misfortune, melancholy, or resentment, you are literally actively making the world around you uglier.
Wait, so the implication is that expressing a bad mood or, just voicing a frustration isn't just a psychological release valve, it actually carries a direct metaphysical consequence.
Yeah, exactly. The text treats emotions as magnetic sources. Passive, negative, and pessimistic states, they don't just dissipate into the air, they act as a homing beacon. The author argues that beauty attracts beauty, but ugliness summons ugliness. Broadcasting anxiety or resentment basically guarantees that the universe will orchestrate events, bring people, and create situations that match and amplify that exact anxiety.
There's actually a specific line in the translation that just hits like a ton of bricks regarding this. The author writes, "Do not expect the garbage from your mouth to attract phoenixes."
It's brilliant distillation, really. I mean, it condenses the entire philosophy into a single, unsparing visual.
I kept thinking about how perfectly that ancient-sounding metaphor maps onto a modern social media algorithm.
Oh, that's a great point.
Right. Like, if you spend your time online engaging with rage bait, leaving angry comments, clicking on disaster news all day, the algorithm learns your frequency. It doesn't judge you. It just feeds you more of what you engage with.
It just reflects it back.
Exactly. Soon, your entire digital reality is just a nightmare of outrage and despair. You're putting out garbage, and the algorithm is returning garbage. So, is the author basically describing a metaphysical algorithm?
I'd say the comparison to an algorithm is incredibly apt because, an algorithm is entirely neutral. It doesn't punish you. It simply reflects your inputs.
Hmm.
And the author believes the divine universe operates with that exact same neutral precision, which actually brings us to the title concept.
Being naked.
Yes, being naked. And in the context of this document, nakedness has absolutely nothing to do with physical clothing. It represents total spiritual transparency and magnanimity.
So, a total lack of filters, you stand before the algorithm without trying to manipulate it.
Exactly. The author claims that when God or the divine approaches, hiding anything makes you the stupidest person in the world.
Ow.
Right. The mechanism here is omniscience. If the divine already knows your deepest fears and ugliest thoughts, attempting to project this false front of piety is not just dishonest, it's functionally useless.
Yeah, if God has read receipts on your soul, lying is a complete waste of time. But this brings up a really massive paradox in the text regarding prayer.
Oh, the prayer aspect is fascinating.
Right, because across most traditions, prayer is the designated time to ask for help, to present your struggles or to seek guidance. But this text suggests a completely different mechanism for interaction with the divine.
It does. The text asserts that when God comes to you, your only acceptable role is to be grateful.
But I mean, what if you're in the middle of a terrible crisis? If someone is experiencing profound grief or physical pain, how does the text justify telling them to only show gratitude?
It's a tough pill to swallow.
Wouldn't burying their pain to show gratitude contradict the whole rule of being totally naked and honest?
Well, that's definitely the ultimate friction point of this philosophy. The text's internal logic dictates that nakedness isn't about, vomiting your unedited despair onto the divine.
Okay.
It's about stripping away your ego's demand that the universe fix your specific problems. The author suggests that complaining or asking for specific outcomes is actually an attempt to control the divine. The text vividly states that if you start asking for things, God will literally sigh and leave you.
God sighing. It just paints the divine as this exhausted parent dealing with a demanding child. The underlying message seems to be that asking for things demonstrates a fundamental lack of trust.
Trust really is the operative word here. The text argues that the divine already knows exactly what you need. Therefore, the less you ask for, the more your needs will be satisfied. Relinquishing that desire to control the outcome is what actually opens the channel for the universe to provide.
Okay, let's test this zero demand, full gratitude mindset against, say, a typical Tuesday morning in a modern city. If total internal transparency and never asking for anything is the baseline for spiritual alignment, how does this philosophy address the reality of navigating a material, physical world, a world that, requires us to pay rent and buy groceries?
Well, the author handles the physical world by drawing an uncompromising line between what constitutes nobility and what constitutes lowliness. And this line is determined entirely by your instinctual reaction to any given situation,
I mean, my instinctual reaction usually involves assessing the risk or the cost.
which, according to the text, immediately unites you with lowliness.
Oh, great.
Yeah, the author states that whenever something happens, your first and only consideration must be what you can give. Operating from a posture of giving connects you directly to the sacred. Conversely, the moment your brain calculates what you can get from a situation, the text warns you have descended into lowliness and will never be noble.
But in a market economy, value is largely determined by exchange. Think of modern corporate culture, or business networking, or applying for a job.
Right, it's all transactional.
Exactly. We are systematically trained to evaluate the return on investment, the ROI, for our time and energy. We constantly ask, how does this benefit my career? Or what's my value proposition? It seems like the text views the transactional nature of modern life as a kind of spiritual poison.
It absolutely does. The text fundamentally rejects the transactional mindset. It doesn't just suggest we be a little more generous. It demands a total detachment from societal metrics of wealth. The author states unequivocally, anything that can be valued and bought with money is not of heaven.
Wow. So assigning a dollar value to your time or calculating the financial worth of an interaction actively degrades your spiritual standing.
Yes. And the author actually goes a step further, targeting the individual's value system itself. The text declares that anyone who values money is not a life worthy of heaven.
That is intense.
It's very absolute. The mechanism here is about reliance. If you rely on money for your security and your sense of worth, you are essentially worshiping a man-made metric. You cannot beg the universe for beautiful things. You must cultivate internal beauty and trust that the physical necessities will naturally gravitate toward you as a byproduct of your frequency.
So it's a philosophy of pure magnetism. You don't chase, you attract.
Exactly.
But since the text establishes this strict boundary that anyone who values money is disqualified from heaven, it naturally raises the question of how the author actually defines heaven. If it isn't populated by the ambitious or the traditionally successful, what are the rules of this realm?
So, the text defines heaven primarily through an emotional baseline, rather than, say, a physical location. Heaven is described as a state of existence with absolute zero worries and zero pains.
That sounds idyllic, but given the strict parameters we've seen so far, I'm assuming there's a massive condition attached.
There is. The condition is that you cannot wait until you die to achieve this state.
Oh, interesting.
The author states that if you currently harbor worries, anxiety, or pain, you have nothing to do with heaven and will never reach it. You have to embody the frequency of heaven in your daily life to gain access to it, which leads to how the text categorizes the people around you.
The angels and demons.
Yes. The author removes morality from the definition of angels and demons and replaces it entirely with emotional impact. If a person brings you joy, happiness, freedom, and relaxation, the text says you must not doubt that they are an angel from heaven.
And conversely, if someone causes you stress.
If someone brings you trouble, anxiety, pain, or sorrow, they are, by the author's definition, demons from hell.
That is a radically subjective mechanism. I mean, someone could be a pillar of the community, but if interacting with them fills you with anxiety, the text classifies them as a demon in your reality.
That's right. The logic is that light banishes darkness. If you feel darkness around someone, you are simply not in the light.
This brings me to a detail in the text that honestly forced me to completely stop reading and reread it 3 times.
I think I know which part you mean.
Amidst all of this sweeping theology about angels and light and rejecting money, the author drops an incredibly specific, jarringly earthly constraint. The quote is, "There is no marriage in heaven. Once you marry, never expect to reach heaven."
Yeah, for most readers, that is easily the most deeply provocative line in the entire document.
It subverts almost every global tradition. I mean, across wildly different cultures and religions, marriage is usually revered as a sacred, foundational institution. It's meant to be a reflection of divine love. Why would this specific bond be the ultimate anchor that prevents someone from reaching heaven? Is the author saying that trying to lock down the future through a contract is essentially a failure to trust the universe?
You've hit the exact mechanism the author is targeting. Marriage, in the context of this text, isn't just about loving another person. It represents a legal contract, a societal expectation, and a rigid framework for long-term earthly planning. The text views this as a great principle.
A great principle. How does the text define that?
So great principles are the heavy intellectual and moral frameworks humanity builds to try and control the chaos of the world. That includes religious dogmas, political ideologies, and institutions like marriage. The author argues that subscribing to these rigid principles traps you. The text warns that if you spend your life strictly adhering to and spouting great principles, you will end up hung in the air.
Hung in the air, meaning you're stuck in a sort of intellectual purgatory.
Precisely that. The mechanism of being hung in the air means your heavy intellectualizing has disconnected you from the pure, grounded, sensory joy of the earth, while simultaneously preventing the total unburdened surrender required to experience the delicacies of heaven.
You're just trapped in your own mind.
Exactly. The text explicitly instructs readers to learn how to play and amuse themselves. It favors joyful, unattached simplicity over rigid, man-made institutions.
So to reach this version of heaven, you must travel incredibly light. No money, no marriage contracts, no heavy ideological debates, just pure playfulness and total reliance on the universe.
Which makes the final shift in the document so jarring. The text pivots away from this ethereal, carefree floating and suddenly delivers a highly practical, almost ruthless manual for surviving human group dynamics.
It is absolute tonal whiplash. You go from surrender nakedly to the divine straight into office politics and social survival. And the primary rule the author gives for navigating society is do not stand out.
Yes. The text warns that being exceptional, conspicuous, or trying to lead a group will inevitably result in the group abandoning or turning on you. It claims that glamour and attention belong to celebrities, but true happiness is reserved for ordinary people who possess great internal wisdom but intentionally choose to appear slow-witted.
I have to push back on the author here because this goes against the core engine of our modern attention economy. We are constantly told to stand out, to be disruptors, to build a personal brand, to make sure everyone knows our value. Why would a spiritual text advocate for putting on camouflage and intentionally playing dumb? How does society even progress if everyone is pretending to be slow-witted?
Well, the author separates spiritual progression from societal functioning. The text is deeply skeptical of human nature when it operates in groups. The mechanism behind appearing slow-witted is energy conservation.
Energy conservation.
Yeah. Human group dynamics are inherently fueled by ego, competition, and friction. By blending in and appearing unremarkable, you avoid triggering the insecurities of others. You prevent yourself from becoming a target for someone else's ego, thereby conserving your vital energy for your internal spiritual connection.
Ah, so it's a defensive camouflage. If you look like a threat or a highly useful tool, society will try to use you. If you look unremarkable, they just leave you alone.
Exactly. The text strongly advises against wasting your energy trying to reason with unreasonable people. It actually compares it to the futility of trying to force cats and mice to live together as a family. It's against their nature, and trying to change it only exhausts you.
There's also this brilliant, highly cynical warning in this section about people who present themselves as saviors.
Oh, the author is highly suspicious of the messianic complex. The text warns that if someone claims they want to help all sentient beings, like if they are preaching grand salvation but they haven't even managed to handle their own basic personal affairs, you should run the other way. The author states they are either completely out of their mind or they are actively digging a trap to exploit you.
Beware the guru whose own house is a mess. It's such a grounded piece of advice. The author strips away the spiritual aesthetic and demands practical proof.
Because the ultimate metric for truth in this philosophy relies entirely on observation, not auditing someone's words. The text explicitly advises instead of listening to what people say, it is better to see what they do. What comes out of their mouth might deceive others, but what they do will not.
It creates a really fascinating duality. Right. Internally, you're expected to operate with complete transparency, total surrender to the divine, and a rejection of earthly wealth. But externally, as you walk down the street, you operate almost like a spiritual secret agent. You stay quiet, you blend into the crowd, you avoid grand debates, and you evaluate everyone strictly by their actions.
It is a cohesive, dual-layered survival strategy. You protect your soul by rejecting the heavy principles of mankind, and you protect your physical body by refusing to engage in the ego-driven friction of society.
So what does this all mean when we piece the whole map together for you listening? We began with the terrifying concept of the mirror, the idea that our hidden resentments and unspoken gratitude literally act as magnetic forces, shaping the physical reality we walk into every day.
And then we move for the rigorous demand to strip away our demands of the universe. We analyze the mechanisms of why asking for things blocks the divine flow, and why the text views the pursuit of money and the institution of marriage as heavy anchors that keep a soul trapped on the ground.
And we landed on the gritty realization that surviving alongside other humans requires conserving our energy, avoiding the spotlight, and trusting only the undeniable truth of a person's actions. It's an endlessly challenging framework for navigating life.
It demands a continuous, rigorous audit of the invisible baggage and the societal programming we drag with us into every interaction.
Absolutely. And as we conclude this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final thread to pull, taken straight from the source text. We talked earlier about the metaphor of putting out garbage versus attracting phoenixes. Well, the author issues one final, incredibly sharp warning about the words we choose to share with the world. The text says, "Do not preach to others the truth that you do not understand. It is all rubbish."
It's a profound check on the human ego.
It really is. And it makes you wonder about the modern world we live in. We exist in a culture that incentivizes us to constantly broadcast our opinions, to immediately offer advice on topics we barely grasp, and to always be the loudest, most certain voice in the room. If our understanding of the universe and of our own inner workings is constantly shifting and evolving, at what point are we ever truly qualified to preach our truth to anyone else? Are we, in our desperate rush to be heard, just flooding the world with more garbage when we should be quietly internally making ourselves beautiful to attract the phoenixes? Something for you to ponder the next time you feel the urge to offer unsolicited wisdom. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.